All right, we're going to look at another project that's a potential use of Simplify3D version 5. So this is one of my most complicated models. It's a terrain model for the Perseverance and Ingenuity rover and helicopter on Mars. This is where they landed. So I have these different terrains. This is the terrain of the crater where it landed. I've got different markers on here. This is where it landed. This is where it did some science, and it's going to go driving up this canyon and maybe up to the top of the rim of the crater. Along the edges, I have the key on the back and some information about when they landed and when the first flight took place. On this side, I've got the two organizations responsible for the rover, JPL and NASA, and the name of the crater, Jezero crater, and then a 1 kilometer scale. So this is a nice outreach item that I use for public outreach from my astronomy club. Anyway, I tried slicing this on the Simplify3D version 4. You'll see that it has some problems. So again, this model is very complicated. I started out with a 3D model published by NASA, and then I added these markers. So if you look how it sliced this. So for these markers, like the square marker, it didn't put any support in that whole area there. So it turned out that I didn't actually print this because it looked like it was going to be a problem. So didn't print this one. Instead, I used FlashForge, FlashPrint rather. This is the free software that comes with a FlashForge printer. And for this one, let's look at the parameters I use. So the lower area I was worried about being stiff, so I increased and also I was worried about the flat areas not having enough support. So for the first 80 layers I had 25% infill density, and after that I went down to 10%. And I'm using a 3D infill, which is a gyroid. So if we do the slice preview, you can see. So there's the gyroid. So it's 20% down here, and you can see it's laying down the flat areas. And then as it gets higher up here, it's only 10% because it's steeper, so it doesn't need as much support as what I figured. So this prints in a little over 16 hours, and it prints okay. But I thought this would be a good opportunity to see if one of the new features of Simplify3D version 5 would help with slicing this model. So dropped it in here. This is on the G2 now, my Guider 2. So it's got a bigger print area. And for this one, I picked gyroid because that seemed to work well for the other one. But the feature I'm talking about here is the dense internal infill. So when you get close to putting the surface layers on, you can increase the infill density to give it some more support, so it'll be stiffer. So this defaults to 0. So if you have this as 0, then it won't do this. So again, I'm trying to print the whole thing at 10% infill, but with this, I'm hoping that these flat areas will have enough support so that they'll print properly. So we'll see. It'll be a little bit of a challenge to print this, I think, using these parameters. But if it does, then it's going to take a lot less time and use less material. Because the FlashForge, well, this version of FlashForge only gives you the length of material. I think the newer version, which I actually had some problems with, so I'm still using a 5.2. Will tell you how many grams you're using. But according to my calculations, it was using about 220 grams of filament. So for this one, with 10% all the way through, it's only going to use about 187 grams. So for one reel, of 1 kilogram reel, I can get 5 of these prints with this print, and with the FlashForge version, I only get 4 prints. So let's look at how this sliced it. So we can look for those problems before. So here's that square before, but you can see it's putting support material in that square area. So it sliced that properly now. And these red squigglies here, these are the higher density filament or infill that's putting in when it gets close to putting in the three surface layers. So the question is, if we look at some of these, it goes over here. You can see here, it's just printing off, not supported. So it's doing the high density, but it's printing it not supported. So whether that, it's like bridging, right? So I'm hoping it's squiggly enough that it'll adhere to each other and will make a surface that will make a nice clean surface and support this. So I'll have to see. This could fail. I have to give it a try. And again, when we get to the higher elevations, there's no problem because it's only just doing a little edge here. So because the model gets much steeper up here, so you don't really need that much support because the layers are printing on top of each other. So anyway, so this is only taking 15 hours. So actually about the same amount of time, but less filament. I might try this. I think I'm going to go for the whole deal here. So I'm going to try doing combined infill to speed it up. And because it's doing combined infill, it's only printing every second layer of infill. So I'm going to change this to 4. So let's try that. I think I'm going to try that. That'll make a dramatic difference in the amount of time it takes to print. It's a little under 13 hours now. Yeah, so that saves about 3 hours. So I'm going to try this. It could fail. If it does, I'm out, a couple hundred grams of filament. But if it works, then that'll really be a big help, getting an extra print out of each reel and speeding things up considerably. So a 16-hour print is kind of, the longer the print, the more risky it is because you get a power failure or something else could go wrong. So. All right, so we'll try this out and we'll see how we do. Okay, so we're ready to test our print of the Jezero Crater 3D model. And this is our first real test. We loaded our filament, we're ready to start printing. So the Simplify3D produces 2 files for the slicing. A regular G-code file, which is what we've been getting from version 4. It also makes a GX file, which is specific to the FlashForge and includes a thumbnail. So there's our model. It's cold here in the garage this morning. It's 54 degrees. It's pretty high humidity because it's been raining. So I'm printing with the top on, even though they say don't print with the top on with PLA. I always do unless it's over 70. So anyway, we're going to start this. And Simplify3D predicted 12 hours and 17 minutes. Now, if it was FlashForge, I would believe that number. FlashPrint. If it was FlashPrint, I would believe that number, and it would be very close to that. But FlashForge version 4, or Simplify3D version 4, was usually about 10% under the actual time. But we're going to go ahead and try. We're going to use the GX version, and it says 12 hours and 17 minutes. So we're going to set our timer for 12:17 and then come back and check on it. Now I do have the time-lapse camera set up, so usually I do 10-second intervals, but since this is a 12-hour print, I'm going to do 30-second intervals. Then I can press it down later and make it into a quick time lapse. So, all right, so starting up. So I usually don't start the time lapse until it gets up close to the top. So I'm going to start that up. We'll start the timer, and then we'll come back periodically during the print and see how it's doing. Mostly interested in seeing what happens when now it says 12 hours and 18 minutes, so it's already changing its prediction. Most we're interested in seeing how the 10% infill and the dense infill on top of that works on the flat areas of the model. See, this area down here, it's pretty flat. The steep areas, I'm not worried about the infill, it's fine. And if you remember from before, with the FlashPrint slicing, all right, starting up here. With the FlashPrint slicing, I used 20% infill down below and then changed to 10% up above. So that took 16 hours to print and used more material. So I have high hopes for this one. Let's see if we got started okay. Yeah, our white move is okay. So it looks like we're off to the races. All right, we'll come back in a couple hours and maybe it'll be up to this flat area where it's doing the dense infill. That'll be interesting to see. All right, this printer got off to a good start. And you can see it's laying down the first layer of gyroid infill. This is 10% gyroid. All right, you can see it started to put in the denser infill. I just went over it. So I think it's working. Even though some of it's printed out in the air, because we're printing 2 layers of infill at once, so it's going to be a thicker bead of filament. And it's going to be cooled, and I think it's going to, I'm doing 2 thick layers, and I think it's going to work. So we're going to see, once it starts laying down the surface on top of it, we'll see if it actually is working. All right, I set my timer at 12:18 to start with, and now we're at 8:24, so almost 4 hours of printing. But this guy is still saying 10:31, so it looks like it's recalculating as it goes. I did do one FlashPrint print earlier, and it was pretty accurate, but then at the end it kept adding minutes because it wasn't quite going to finish quite in time. So anyway, it's not going to take 12 hours, but we have enough time, so it doesn't matter. Let's take a look at how it's doing, and you can see that it's doing pretty well. All right, here's that same area with the FlashPrint version. And you can see it has little holes and voids just like this one. So I think the quality is actually similar. If it is, I mean, it's a big win because it's going to take a lot less material. We can get 5 prints per reel instead of 4. And it should be faster. This one took 16 hours. I'm expecting this one to not take that long. So we'll know eventually when it's all done. All right, so it's at 99.8%, and it seems like with the GX files, it continually refines the time remaining, which is actually pretty handy the first time you're printing something. So even though it wasn't accurate in its overall prediction, because we're upwards of over 13 plus hours, I don't remember exactly when it started at this point, but when it's all done, it'll tell us the total time. But as it's printing, it's continually upgrading this time left. So I like that. I'll be using gx.gx files whenever I can. And if we look at the print, we'll take it out in a minute. It's almost done. But it looks great to me. So we'll do a side-by-side comparison with the one I printed with FlashPrint as soon as it's done. And again, we're going to check the weight and see how well it did compared to what it predicted. It's done. So 13:49 versus 12:17. So it took about an hour and a half longer. All right, so I tared the scale. I took this out of the machine. And 8:17 is how much is left. Right, so here's our print. So you're on this flexible surface. It's going to be a lot easier to get off. Like it might just come off without any persuasion. Now we're going to get a little bit of persuasion. Okay, the short side, short way, the spatula can reach all the way across. There. All right, so the bottom came out nice. I remember I told you to put these score lines in. It's not as big of a deal on this one, but I think it still helps release the model from the surface. So takes a little bit longer to print because you got to print these little overlaps, but it's no big deal. All right, so here's our 2 models. We're going to weigh them. This one should have more filament in it because it had a higher percentage at the bottom, so let's try that. Okay, so this is the FlashPrint version, 219 grams. And this one is 147, so just a little bit less than our 150. You can tell this is lighter. Let's look at the details. So I would say the surface details are similar. There's a little bit more holes over here in this canyon than this one. Not sure why that is. And this ridge line here is a little bit not quite as good. So these little markers, see those markers are called out on the back here. And these little markers, I would say the Simplify3D version is just as good. Just about as good, yeah. Some are, I would say it's just as good as this one. In fact, slightly better. I would rank it slightly better. So let's look at the durability. So this is creaking a little bit. This one definitely feels more solid. So I'm not so sure I like this one. Yeah. See how this flexes? I'm not really happy with that. This one is solid. So you know what? This was an experiment. I think I would say at this point it failed because I mean I could go with higher densities and it would probably feel better. But since this one, I know this one works and it's got the density I want, I think I'm just going to go with this one. It's worth a try, but I'm afraid Simplify3D came up a little bit short. Again, I could probably tweak this with higher densities and maybe we'd be okay. But then I'm not really gaining anything over a file I already have that it prints successfully. So good to know. So we're going to stop the print we just started and try something else. So print another one of this version. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Post a comment if you have any questions or ideas and I'll try to respond. That's all for now, but more videos are coming, and if you want to see them, please subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification icon if you don't want to miss one. This is Beta Signy signing out, and keep looking up.